Hello! At this time the video goes out, I still can't talk about this one. This is the BetaFPV LiteRadio 3, and I already made a review video on it, but it's not out yet, so I can't talk about it. That is a radio with an ELRS transmitter built in. But as it happens, the BetaFPV LiteRadio 2 SE, which works on D8 and D16, that sort of stuff, and is out, so I can talk about it, you can fit a board in it here which will convert it to EspressLRS. So I thought we'd try fitting that in there and we'll see how it works. What you basically get in the box, not an awful lot to it, some sponge and this here board which looks like this. Now this is compatible with BetaFPV's own configurator, which I talked about in the LiteRadio 3 video, not that you could have watched it. And this was a quite nice way of actually setting up EspressLRS. So yeah, this would be interesting, I figure. So let's go into close-up, let's get this apart and let's see how we fit them together. Well, I went to the website and checked what they had in terms of instructions, and they didn't really have any. They just had sort of a description of this, labelled everything, and then they sort of labelled inside the radio. I think the inference from that is we look for like SC, SD, SA, SB, which are the switches. We unplug them from one board, we plug them in the other. I notice there's a little UFL connector there, so I don't know if there's something internally that's plugged in the original board that we have to unplug and plug into that one. I guess we'll figure it out. So let's get the screwdriver, crack this guy open. Okay, those are unscrewed but don't really want to come out. But that gives us this. So that is the power to unplug. And there's the board as it stands there. So yeah, it kind of looks like what we have to do is just unplug these, make sure you know where they are, make sure you know where the battery is, see what's on the other side and plug it all back in again. This looks like it should be easy to disconnect this board and lift out. We just have to know, and this is actually quite useful what the diagram is for, is the fact that if we unplug these we need to know that that one goes there and this one goes there and that sort of thing, and the right plugs go to the right things. But we can check that out, so let's unscrew this one and see if there's something on the other side as well. Okay, as you see I've unplugged all the leads and I've taken the screws out, so now we should just be able to lift up and see we've got something that's still connected. Aha! And there's that little UFL connector. So let's quickly carefully unplug that UFL connector because they like to break, and that's our original board there, and it should literally just be a case of, hello, focus, connecting all back up. So I just need to connect that antenna there and then everything else is the same. Right, I'm going to crack on with that now and start putting that together, and I'll show you what it looks like before I put the top on. And there it is, all connected up again. So the only thing that remains is plug the power back in, crack the top back on, do the screws up, and let's see if it works, and let's see how we configure things for EspressLRS. It's going to be a bit different because we're going to use BetaFPV's own configurator, which I have used before on the BetaFPV LiteRadio 3, and it's actually pretty good. As a side note, you can see the little antenna here, and if you wanted more range out of this, then obviously if you find a little UFL connector, a better antenna like a Moxon or something, you can always add that on. I don't know if anyone's tried that, but it would seem to be fairly simple. Anyway, I'll put this top on and we'll see how it works. Okay, now given that we've installed the board, the next thing we want to do is to go into BetaFPV's configurator to actually set this up. I've got some experience of running through this, happily enough, from using the pre-release version of the LiteRadio 3, so I know some of the problems I encountered, so I can hopefully get through this. But yeah, one of the things you do is when you connect it, you don't power it on. You just plug it in and then you can say connect RC, and we should go through. And the first thing it's telling me is we need to upgrade the firmware of your LiteRadio, because we are on firmware version 1 and it's got the fact that I've got the LiteRadio 2 SE SX1280. This is where I came unstuck with the pre-release of the LiteRadio 3 because it didn't have any labelled buttons, so I had to figure it out myself. What you do, if I just disconnect it here, I'm going to disconnect my radio, then I'm going to hold in a setup button and power on. And we get a blue light, and then once we plug it in, we should find that we get a port appear here. It's appeared here as a USB modem. From here, we can go to the firmware flasher, and hopefully we should find something's going to happen here. That looks dodgy, doesn't it? Okay, so I spent some time debugging the issues that BetaFPV had there. They had one big problem with the first version of the configurator and a sort of Mac related one with the second version, which we've now sorted out. So hopefully I should be able to flash this, and it's saying we're back to like, oh, you need to flash this. Sounds good to me. And so we're on a LiteRadio 2 SE SX1280. So let's disconnect that. Go to the firmware flasher. And this is one of the things they need to sort out. If you see this loading thing go up, go back to welcome, go to firmware flasher, then it seems to go a bit better. Isn't that weird? There we go. We've got it there. We want to flash it with 101. Okay, let's load the firmware. Ah, finally. Flash firmware. Flashing. Hooray! Only took several weeks. Programming is successful. Sounds like a good start. So let us now go back to welcome and then connect our, actually I need to unplug and replug again because I've just flashed the firmware. Connect RC. And it's saying it's on version 101. Hooray! And that means we can start messing with this bit. And I've got my bind phrase set there, which is good, it remembers that. Set my packet rate to 500. And what is up with these? Because if I look at my roll stick, something doesn't seem right. It's like it goes up to 3 and then down to -100. Channel 2 wrong. That's very weird. How do I do this bit right? Now, I actually messed around with this for 10 or 15 minutes and I was increasing the scale, changing the offset, but I noticed that the stick movement wasn't right. And then I remembered that the BetaFPV LiteRadio 2 had a calibration mode. What you have to do is you press setup and you go through this rigmarole of moving the sticks around. Of course, I never had to do it because it probably came from the factory, right? But because we replaced the internal card, I expect all the potentiometers and stuff are completely different, so it came out wrong. But now we've got the lovely range. There was a weirdness with channel 6, which was going strange. I think looking inside, the cable was possibly being pinched. So anyway, I'll go back to getting on with sorting out what I want to sort out here, which is that's obviously at max power, packet rate's 500. What we've got here is I've got my left hand single, it's channel 5, that's good, that's for arming. And then what I want is my right hand free position switch as channel 6. At the moment that's channel 7, but what you can do is swap these over. So I can say that's SB and that is SC. And interestingly, that has completely made channel 1 go weird. That's odd. Save and reboot, see what happens. I've left the offset there for some reason. Idiot. That was from last time. So channel 1's absolutely fine, channel 2's fine, channel 3's fine, channel 4's fine. That's my arm switch on the left. Channel 6 is on the right, channel 7's on the left, channel 8's on the right. Save and reboot. Okay. I think we're happy. I think it's going to work. We'll try connecting to something and make sure. So I've just plugged in my STP Aquila frame, that sort of long-range quad that I built, and obviously I haven't had to bind or anything because of the bind phase, and that's working no problem. So if I unplug that one and then I plug in my BetaFPV 85.2, which runs for free, that also works. So no binding necessary, it just works with your bind phrase. So let's fly something. Okay, as the wind gusts up, BetaFPV LiteRadio 2 SE with the EspressLRS board fitted. Let's test it out in this area with this quad. If this looks a bit familiar, and if you're a regular viewer of my channel, you might recognise this as being the Beta 85 Pro 2 review. This is the one with the built-in SPI ELRS receiver, and I used this radio in the second part of that. So the very first flight I did in the farm, I was using the pre-release LiteRadio 3, but on this second part where I took several batteries out in the woods and some other place, I was using the LiteRadio 2 SE with the board fitted. So if you want to watch the full video there's a link that's going to appear up in the corner, and it'll be down in the description. You can see what that's like. But pretty much the LQ didn't really flicker. Between about 100 and 98, that was as low as it got. Obviously, we're not doing any long range here, but I really don't think this radio is designed for that. But what I did do when I was testing the LiteRadio 3 is try a long range flight, or to see how long it could go. Now I'm going to show you this because I thought lots of people would want to know the range, and really it's pretty much the same chipset in the LiteRadio 3 that it is in the 2 SE, so I believe you'll get the same sort of results from it. Okay, it's testing time. I'm sure people want to know, well, how far can you go on this? It's just a little radio, it's got no external antenna, what's it going to do? I had intended to go up to the farm today. We are down to being a one-car family, and my wife has the car today because she had something to do with work, and my work is playing with toys, so she won. Hence, I'm here. This is possibly the most unsuitable place for doing distance. I'm not worried so much about flying over trees, it's just the fact we're in this very narrow corridor, and if we stray outside the corridor, our FPV signal is going to be easily blocked. So I don't know how well that's going to go. And in order to test this out, what I'm going to do, first off, we've got this little dude. This is the STP Aquila, which I tested a little while back, and I had some problems with the GPS. I've been out, I think I've sorted those out. We found there was one wire that came off when I started messing around with it, and maybe it was a loose connection, so hopefully we'll get a GPS signal. Again though, I haven't tested GPS rescue, and I'm not about to over a bunch of trees, so we're in a little bit of jeopardy, but hopefully not too much. Just slightly out of the jeopardy, although it feels quite calm where we are here because of the trees protecting us. There's about a 15-mile-an-hour wind. Again, I'm not worried about like quads being able to cut through the air. It's just when you're trying to keep in line with something and there's a bit of wind, sometimes it's quite easy to get blown off course, but hey, we'll see. Now, in order to see how well it does, what I'm first going to do is do a flight with the TBS Mambo, which has the Namimbo module in there, which is very good. We seem to get a decent distance on there, and I've set it up the same way, so 100 milliwatts of power and using 250 hertz speed, and instead of flying this on 500 hertz, I've put it down to 250. So I'm going to do one with the Mambo first, come back, land, hopefully, then see how it goes with this BetaFPV radio, and let's see what happens. Hopefully we'll make it back. Okay, we waited around for some minutes and we got 7 sats up. I got 9 in the garden, and my garden's rubbish, so I figured this is okay. But as I said, I'm slightly worried about being able to keep this corridor and trying to get a decent distance to test how we do. In theory it should be fine. I know the wind is running left to right, so I'm kind of turning slightly into the wind, just give it a lean, just to see if I can keep my line of where I'm going. You'll also notice I'm going reasonably high because obviously I've got those trees straight in front of me, and as we get further out, obviously the line of sight direct back to me is going to start hitting those trees. So I need to go, you know, reasonably high to go reasonably far, but there's going to be a sort of limit where, you know, it's just going to get impossible to do. But it's going okay at the moment. We've got a full signal. We're out to 800 meters. We're starting to get a little bit of dodginess, bits of crackles on the screen there. Now normally this is an awesome VTX. it shouldn't have a problem at all. But yeah, that's the 1K, and it's starting to get a little bit fuzzy now, so I figured we should come on back. And we've got a nice sort of level set. So we had a quick drop down to about 92 there, but most of the way the LQ's been at like 100 all the way, dropping a couple of points occasionally. And I can see what I did here. I basically overcorrected myself, so I've ended up further over to the right than I would have expected. We're going for that little tiny looking alleyway in all those trees straight ahead of us. It looks a bit like a T-junction. But yeah, the quad's working quite nice now. I was glad to hear. I've got the Loctite on it, so it seems a little bit smoother. It's got 12 satellites now, so that's good. And yeah, it's doing quite well. It's just a bit of a pain about this flying site. Very sort of difficult to fly from if you want to go any sort of distance. But you know, we've got our measure of what a decent TX module can do. So now it's a case of finding what the LiteRadio can do. I thought I saw either like a kite or a buzzard just go past me there, which is why I suddenly veered off track. But anyway, let's bring this down and we can test the next one. I did have a bit of a fly around, just up and down, just to get rid of some of the battery voltage, but I brought this in, set it down, didn't land it very well of course, just clipped a little bit of grass there, but you know, we're down and ready to go for the next one. Now, in case you're wondering how I tell which DVR's which, I do this sort of thing just to tell myself. If I'm out with like literally loads of quads and I'm doing loads of different testing, then I will actually write down a list on my phone about what I'm doing and what I'm testing and what order. Before I set off, I did one very important thing, which was something I wouldn't normally do. I actually set the failsafe to rescue mode, even though I haven't tested rescue mode. I figured that could be slightly better than just letting it drop over some trees. Hopefully I'm not going to lose the signal is my sort of thought pattern, but we'll see. Now instantly I noticed here that the control was a little bit different. It almost felt like there was a bit of a dead zone in the centre. I can't be completely sure, but yeah, it certainly felt different than my other radio. It is of course set up exactly the same. All the settings are pretty much in Betaflight. We don't really do anything on the radio itself. So yeah, I just thought, is that something it just doesn't have the resolution or something like that? Anyway, we're off again, and I'm trying to sort of go a truer direction this time. So I'm not trying to overcorrect myself too much. I'm just going in what I think is a straight line, and it's okay, but I'm starting to see we're hitting the 80s in the LQ here, and we just got it under 47, and at this point I'm in mass panic, shaking the radio around. Now it didn't go into rescue, but it didn't exactly come back. It started to come back, but then it seemed like really laggy, like I'd be moving the sticks and then half a second later we'd get a reaction. But eventually we got the signal back, which yeah, that's a relief. There's nothing like getting your heart racing a little bit. So yeah, what we actually probably had in reality is just a bit of a micro failsafe where it lost the signal completely. What rescue mode does, it sort of sits there just for a couple of seconds. It's like, is it going to come back? And at that point it probably came back, but the link quality wasn't very good, and so we weren't really getting a response from the radio. But fortunately it sort of held itself there in the air and came back to me. So I think we can say this radio isn't a long range radio. Anyway, after that slight heart attack and recovery, I felt my heart had enough action for that day, so brought it down, brought it on back. Okay, well there you go. That board swap worked pretty well. As soon as we had that in, as soon as we had the configurator actually working, we didn't have to do the bind, we just used the bind phrase, and we could do our own thing and fly quads about. So if you're a bit sort of fed up with the bad range you're getting on your little D8 quads, then it's worthwhile swapping over. That's if you've got quads that are going to use ELRS. And again, I have to put some caveats in, because this is ideal for this sort of thing, which I really enjoyed flying it with, because I didn't have to think about range at all for this sort of thing. It just flew around and that was great. But if you're going to go longer range and this sort of quad with like proper antennas, then this isn't really up for that job, and I don't think it's designed to be there. I had a failsafe 800 meters. I used this one. I know I wouldn't have a problem with range. It just go forever. And in fact, BetaFPV are making that sort of larger module that'll go a lot further, and I'll be reviewing this soon. So it's good, but you have to use the right circumstances, because this is really your starter radio. These things really came sort of bundled along with these, so you could buy all in one package. So don't, just don't go like, yay, I can do 10 kilometers now, because that's not going to happen. But they're a worthy upgrade instead of the hopeless SPI receivers we used to get for D8 and D16. I really do like it for that. So there are a couple of things to note. I mean, first off, when the configurator works, I think it's really good. And I actually prefer it than using the official EspressLRS configurator, because that configurator obviously is a very generalized thing for lots of different brands, and it looks very programmery when it comes up and it's all the compilation stuff. So the good thing is, this configurator is just built for this radio and the later version 3 of that radio, which isn't quite out yet. And that's good, because it's hard to mess up. You've got your firmware versions there, you know what version of the radio you're using, you go across. And if you're using SPI receivers like this, there is no flashing, because it's all based inside of Betaflight. The only problem with that is that BetaFPV have provided the ELRS firmware for their transmitters themselves, so you're not getting the sort of official latest build from EspressLRS repository and having it available. BetaFPV are building it, they're putting it on their own GitHub repository, and then when they do, the list will update and you'll be able to get it. So you're sort of kind of held back for what BetaFPV is doing rather than what EspressLRS is doing. So there might be some discrepancies going forward about what they support and what they don't support. That's just one thing to be aware of. But as I said, pretty much because this is a sort of small beginner radio usually used for these, it shouldn't be that much trouble. The only other thing to say that if you did want a small and cheap radio that uses ELRS for flying this sort of thing, you might want to hold on, because BetaFPV had told me that the version 3 of the LiteRadio is just about to come out. It's a little bit different. You'll notice some differences between them. That's pre-release version. It may change. Hopefully I'll have that soon. I'll be able to check it out in more detail. But in the meantime, this has been the EspressLRS upgrade board for the LiteRadio 2 SE. It's quite specific. It looks like this, but this is the one we took out. And you can find links down below to where you can check it out in more detail. And thanks for BetaFPV for sending it along. Hope that review's been helpful, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.